As he and his wife would help out. This is the third time since 2018 he's covered the cost of funeral expenses for others. Thanks for watching CBS 2 News at 5. CBS 2 News at 6 continues now.
Live from the CBS Broadcast Center in Los Angeles, this is CBS 2 News at 6 p.m.
Tonight, only on 2, we're learning a shelter dog that hadn't been walked in nearly a month attacked a volunteer, and now she's speaking out, calling on LA Animal Services to do a better job of caring for its animals.
CBS 2's Christine Lazard joins us now with her story. Christine?
Yeah, you know, this volunteer was apprehensive. She really felt like she didn't want the blame to be placed on this dog. She feels like that dog was put in a very inhumane situation. Now, a local vet tells me when a dog is left in a kennel without being taken out for walks for weeks at a time, they can essentially go crazy and become aggressive. The volunteer says she isn't mad at the dog. She's blaming LA Animal Services for what she says is not doing enough to control its stray animal population.
Hey, girl.
For 5 years, almost every day of the week, Nancy Udovac volunteered here at the Harbor Animal Care Center run by the city of LA. But she hasn't been back since February, when a dog named Tyson attacked her as she let him out of his cage with another volunteer, biting her hand so severely it severed an artery.
He snapped.
Nancy believes Tyson was a victim of his environment. She says he had been at the shelter for more than a year and hadn't been walked in 3 weeks.
Some dogs, they just can't take being locked up and no human interaction for that amount of time.
Veterinarian Steve Maniak says since dogs are pack animals, being isolated can make a tame dog turn aggressive.
They need to interact to be comfortable with interaction. If that interaction is removed and they're not interacting with other animals, with people, then any interaction after that is anxiety causing.
Last week, we showed you heartbreaking images posted to social media by volunteers in LA City animal shelters of dogs being left for weeks, even months at a time in their kennels without going for walks. Nancy says she saw dogs go cage crazy.
Sometimes they just spin in their kennels, they bark, they jump, they just jump incessantly, sometimes they injure themselves by rubbing their noses against the cage.
And that's why she went to Tyson that day, because he was one of the dogs that hadn't been walked in weeks.
It's inhumane. It's inhumane to keep dogs locked up for that amount of time.
Tyson was euthanized after he bit Nancy. Advocates say his case demonstrates why a no-kill policy, without taking steps to reduce our animal population, is counterproductive.
So the city is trying to carry out this no-kill policy, and all that meant for this dog was he sat in a cage for reportedly 2 years, and he's euthanized anyway, and someone has now been bitten. That policy is wrong. He shouldn't have been in that cage for as long as he was.
Earlier this week, the city council held an emergency meeting to address the crisis in its overcrowded and understaffed shelters. But advocates say volunteers have been sounding the alarm for years, that more time and money must be invested in enforcing the city's spay and neuter ordinance.
We need to bring the numbers down so that it's a manageable number of homeless animals, and so that there is a good home for every animal who needs it, and it's doable.
LA Animal Services tells us that even if a dog isn't walked regularly, they do get other enrichment activities. Now, Nancy tells me that was often blowing bubbles into their cages. We did ask LA Animal Services specifically about Tyson's case, and they said no one can speculate why a dog displays certain behaviors. Nancy also saying there were times that dogs did not have water, not because people were being negligent, but because they're just understaffed. And with, say, 100 dogs and a few volunteers, you just couldn't always get to them. And it's just so heartbreaking to hear that. And these volunteers really just want to see change. And they say that change comes not just with beefing up your staffing numbers, but also getting to the root of the problem, which is that we have too many animals. We need to enforce the spay and neuter ordinance that's already on the books.
Sure. All right, Christine.
Tough to see those animals, right?
No
It's
kidding.
so hard. And you can imagine being a volunteer.
Sure.
She said she would go to bed at night thinking about all the animals.
Oh, my goodness. Christine, thank you so much for your report.
Thanks, Christine. President Biden says his symptoms are mild after becoming infected with COVID-19. He is now in isolation. The president is being treated with the antiviral drug Paxlovid. The 79-year-old recently returned